Hey, friends. Hello, hello. Welcome back. It is Wednesday, March 6th, and this is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. My name is Shaun, Al-Shatti, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend over there, Marc Raimondi, and he is back in the sauna in Los Angeles. How you doing, Marc?
I am back in the sauna, and fans and friends, if you're wondering why Shaun is a little bit not that doesn't have the exuberance that he usually begins the show with, is because Shaun, you've been sick since Friday. You've been sick. You've been sick since before UFC 235. Caught a little bit of a Vegas bug, huh?
Oh, my goodness, man. It has been a rough, rough couple of days. I have not been able to eat solid food since about Saturday morning-ish. It's been a little rough, but hey, I'm here. We got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to power through it. How you been, man?
Everything is good here, and you powered through UFC 235. You felt awful that entire time, and you still made it through the entire event. And now you're gonna get through this live chat. I'll try to do the bulk of the talking, which I probably do anyway. So it's not a problem for me because I don't shut up.
Yes, you're going to have to do the heavy lifting for me today, just like DeAndre Ayton has for the Suns over the last couple games. I'm going to lean on you, and you're going to get me. But hey, man, there is a ton to discuss. You are back in the sauna, so that means good things are coming. UFC 235 was a fun week in Las Vegas, man. There was a lot that happened. There was a lot of storylines coming out of it, and we turn right back around for UFC Wichita this week. Not a bad card. Good enough.
No, it's fine. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting threads there. Also, there is just generally a lot going on, and this is your guys' show. So if you want to ask us questions, I already see I'm all over the place already. But this is your guys' show, so we'll answer whatever you want us to talk about. If you want us to ask us questions, do it on the MMA Fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recommendations, those will turn green and get priority. Also, you can hit those hashtags, the A-Side and Chat Rappers on Twitter, and we will get to that in the second part of the show. Replay of the show goes up immediately on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever else you get your pods. Those should be up later today as well. In the meantime, man, let's get rolling. Let's get cracking. We got an insane amount of green questions today, so we're going to have to roll through some of these. We're going to try to get through them all, though. And so first is coming from the MMA Fighting page from our good friend M. Haydock06, who's asking rules on a grounded fighter. Hey, Shaun and Marc, I have some quick questions on the different definitions of a grounded fighter. Can you confirm? Are there only... Okay, so here's the list of questions, I should say.
Yes.
Are there only...
Go one by one.
Yes. Are there only 2 definitions for a grounded fighter? And if so, what exactly are the definitions? My interpretation is 2 hands flat versus 1 hand. How does this work internationally? I.e., if Darren Till needs Masvidal in the same way Jones needs Smith, what happens? Are there any plans, discussions to get one settled rule set followed globally? And currently, can promoters, athletic commissions change the rules and tailor them? Thank you. So that is a lot right away. It is all dealing basically with John Jones versus Anthony Smith and what we saw in that fight. So, Marc, I mean, this is right in your wheelhouse. What's your takeaway from that question?
So let's start from the first question that M. Haydock had. Basically, what are the rules? Okay, so the original rule, the first time that there was a unified rules in MMA, the rule was this. Basically, if anything except the soles of a fighter's feet are on the ground, that fighter is considered grounded. So anything but the soles of the feet. Obviously, if the soles of the feet are on the ground, the fighter is standing up. But if anything in addition to that is on the ground, that fighter is a downed opponent. So a knee, a finger, a hand, anything but their butt, anything but the soles of the feet. If that is touching the ground, that fighter is grounded. And many jurisdictions, many commissions, including Nevada, still have that rule for a grounded fighter on their books. So that is why on Saturday night, UFC 235, Anthony Smith was in a crouch. So he had the soles of his feet down, not a knee down. However, he did have 1 hand down on the mat. And that hand down made him a grounded fighter, which means any kind of a knee or a kick to the head is illegal. And John Jones kneed him in the head, and that was an illegal move. However, in other jurisdictions, in other athletic commissions like California, New York, There are a number of them now that have gone over to the new rules, the new unified rules, and when I say new unified rules, I mean in 2016 or 2017, I should say, the ABC, the overseeing body of all the commissions in North America, passed a new set of rules that changed the definition of the grounded fighter. Only some commissions, like the aforementioned California and New York, have actually changed those rules. Some of them have not, and some commissions have changed some of them, and some of them have kept the old ones. Like Nevada has changed some, but it's kept the grounded fighter rule. It's all very confusing. If you're confused, it's because it's confusing. The new grounded fighter rule, which some commissions have, is it's anything but the soles of the feet. It's the original rule with one caveat. You cannot just put one hand down any longer. You have to put both palms or both fists on the ground. So it's the same rule, except you can't play what regulators have called playing the game, whereas you can't just put one finger down and become down. You have to put both palms or both fists down to be down. A knee down, you're still down. Anything but the soles of the feet, but you have to have two hands, not just one hand. But a knee down is still down. Your butt down is still down. It's a little bit confusing, and it has led to issues over the last 2 years where there are different rules in different states, different rules in different jurisdictions, and it's very difficult for fighters to keep that in mind. They're fighting in New York. Oh, the rules are one thing, or you're fighting in Nevada, the rules are another thing, and it's hard for referees. It's hard for referees to kind of, you got to remember in the heat of the moment what state you're in. It's kind of weird. The next question from M. Haydock is, how does this work internationally? So, using the UFC London main event between Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal coming up as an example, the UFC follows the unified rules. They're not unified, but the UFC follows the rules set out by the ABC, by the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports. And that is the quote-unquote new rules, which means you need to have two hands down in order to be considered grounded. Are there any planned discussions to get to one settled rule set followed globally? That would be nice, right? That would be very nice, but the answer is no. The answer is no, and there are commissions in the United States and commission directors that adamantly believe that needing to put two hands down is very bad, and it could cause fighters to take more damage to the head. And I'm talking about commissions like New Jersey, Missouri, Ohio, very adamantly against the new definition of a grounded rule, a grounded fighter. So I don't see them changing that anytime soon. I guess that somewhat answers that question. And currently, can promotions, athletic commissions change the rules and tailor them? Promotions cannot, because it is the athletic commissions, it is the whatever jurisdiction you're in, they make the rules. I guess technically when the UFC regulates itself overseas, they can change the rules, but they have by policy used the unified rules set out by the ABC throughout their, since MMA was regulated going back to 2001. So commissions can tailor the rules. Every commission can have different rules if they want to, because every commission is governed by a different state, and that is kind of why we're in the position we're in, because there is no unification, because a commission can pass their own rules, and that is that. And if you're fighting in that state, you have to go by the state's rules, and so on and so forth. So it's very convoluted. It's very confusing. I don't think John Jones knew what the rule was. I asked him about it at the press conference, and I don't think he knew what it was. And you know what? I can't even blame him, Shaun. I can't blame him for not knowing what the rule is, because it is confusing, and it's just unfair, I think, for fighters to have to deal with the fact that rules are different in different states. John Jones fought in California just 10 weeks ago, and now he's fighting in Nevada. Two different rule sets when it comes to a grounded fighter. Hard to keep track of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really the point that sticks out to me the most, right? Because the irony at this point of calling these things the unified rules, they're not even remotely unified at this point, and they have become so segmented where we have, again, if John Jones is one state over, that's a legal move, what he does.
That's right.
And you, especially for referees, because you mentioned referees, you get guys like a Herb Dean or Keith Peterson or any of these big referees who do a lot of the big shows. They're traveling more or less every single week of the entire year. This is something that these guys have to keep in their head of, every single different weekend of, hey, where am I today? Where am I today? Sometimes Herb will be in one place Friday and one place Saturday, and it'll be a different rule set. And he has to make that mental switch in the heat of the moment. And fighting is such an instinctual sport. For fighters, it's one thing to ask them to think about, where am I in the heat of the moment when I'm about to throw this shot, when this person's about to throw this shot. If I'm down, can someone still hit me with this knee? That's one thing. It's difficult enough. But for a referee in the heat of the moment who is already paying attention to so many other things, to then have to think about, hey, where am I today at this very moment? Where are my feet planted? Which state is this? You're just asking too much of these guys, man. It's going to lead to complications. It's going to lead to frustrations. It's going to lead to mistakes, and more so the more different nuance and changes that we get, and just differences between all these different rule sets. It's just not fair, frankly.
No, it's not fair for anyone really, and I don't know the right answer, because when they did vote on this new package of rules, which the grounded fighter rule was contained in, it passed overwhelmingly at the ABC meeting. I was there. I think there was only one commission that voted against it. But then when push came to shove,
that was New Jersey, right?
Yeah, exactly. New Jersey voted against it. So when push came to shove, though, not every commission ended up passing it, and there are various reasons why that hasn't happened. Some of them are adamantly against it. Some of them aren't even against it, but it's very hard to pass new rules through their state government. I mean, some commissions have to actually, it's got to be like a new law. It's got to be written as like a bill and passed through the state government, has to be voted on by people who probably have no idea anything about MMA. It's very complicated. And I don't know what outside of like a national commission or a North American commission that actually unifies the rules for everyone, which I can't see happening, because states' rights is a big thing in the United States, and I'm sure that there are people in other countries who probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But individual states and their individual liberties are a very big thing in this country. So it's I don't see any way out of this mess anytime soon. And I've been writing about this from really the jump, from 2017 until now, when that stuff was going into effect, and hasn't gotten better since then, man.
If anything, worse. Yeah, if anything, it seems like it's gotten more and more splintered, where there are now different factions who have really dug in regards to the commissions about, hey, this is the way we feel, and we're not changing this. And the ABC conference this year is actually coming to my hometown. It's coming to the desert in Phoenix, Arizona. They're going to have discussions about these type of things later this year here. I expect that it's just going to get more confusing. I don't know that we're going to get some level of resolution from those conferences.
Right. It actually was. It was passed in 2016, the summer of 2016. I was at the conference. It was in Las Vegas, and all the new rules were supposed to go into effect January 1st, 2017. So we're talking about 2 years now that the new unified rules should have been passed across the board, and they haven't been. Recently, Nevada passed some of them. They passed some of them, but not the grounded fighter rule. They kept the old grounded fighter rule, but they adopted some of the other new rules, like the eye poke rule, where you're not supposed to extend your fingers out. You're supposed to keep your hand up, and a referee can warn you for extending the fingers out. It is confusing, and look, it's hard for us to wrap our brains around it, and it's not going to be any easier for fighters or fans or anyone to really understand what the hell is going on.
Yeah. Well,
it's still one of the crazy things about the sport to me is that, can you imagine in the NFL where, on one Sunday you're playing under one set of rules, and then the next Sunday you're playing in a different state, and it's a new set of rules there.
You're facing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and pass interference is allowed, and then the next game you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's something else entirely. Well, hey, let's keep it moving, because there is a lot of fights and a lot of good stuff to talk about from this past weekend and this weekend coming up. And so this next question is coming from Lucian on the MMA Fighting page, who wants to know about the co-main event from this past weekend. Usman Covington fight buildup. Delightful beginning of the spring for both of you. Oh my God, what a friendly welcome. That's already making me feel a little better than I already am. I'm assuming that most of us can agree that there's a lot of intrigue in the Usman-Covington fight, especially as both seem to rely on pressure and being excellent wrestlers. However, do either of you already dread how ugly the buildup for this match will become, especially considering the confrontation between the two that already happened and Covington's telling of it? And do you expect this to be a situation where the UFC itself might start to control the online interactions and comments by the fighters due to the messy last year? And before we even jump into this, Marc, I mean, we were both in Las Vegas for this past week, obviously. I will have to say, I mean, I think that Colby Covington, it has been obviously a controversial figure. A lot of people don't like him. That man kept himself in the headlines, and that man kept himself relevant and current during a fight week that he was not even a part of in a way that I don't know that I've ever seen someone do so well. I mean, he had hits and misses. The finding Dana White at the casino table was probably a miss. The bullhorn thing was probably a hit. But he just kept himself relevant the entire weekend. In the end, it seems like he's going to get what he wants. I don't know if that's a good lesson for fighters moving forward, but it certainly seems to have worked for him. Now, we have already seen it, though. The fight happens on Saturday. On Sunday, Kamaru and Colby Covington and also Kamaru's agent, Ali Abdelaziz, sort of get into a little melee in the casino around it. What really seemed to be a bunch of innocent bystanders. It wasn't the greatest scene. And I will say already just off the top, to address this question, I part of me is a little worried and wary of where this lead up will go. I mean, we've already seen it with Colby doing the deport your ass to Nigeria stuff. That's something I'm not a fan of. That's a little too xenophobic for my taste. There are plenty of ways to navigate this creatively without going to the lowest common denominator like that. And I think Ben Askren has noted that about Colby, that there are ways to trash talk in this game where you don't have to just take the lowest common denominator with it. But I mean, what do you expect from the lead up to this, man?
Yeah, I get what Lucian is saying, and it's already kind of started. If you listen to Colby Covington on Ariel Helwani's MMA show on ESPN on Monday, where he was going pretty low with some of those things he was saying about Ali Abdelaziz, calling him a terrorist. So that's already begun, and I'm not a fan of that either. And to address the last point that Lucian makes, I don't know. I can't see the UFC policing trash talk in that way. I mean,
should they?
I mean, that's a good question, and it brings to mind what they were saying at the Nevada Athletic Commission hearing a few weeks ago about, right now the commission really, for the most part, only sanctions fighters and disciplines fighters for things they do, actions. But they did say that it is a possibility. They have that ability to sanction fighters for words, for what they say in the lead up. It falls under the unsportsmanlike conduct provision in the Nevada regulations. They have a pretty, they have some leeway to do that. So I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if that fight will be in Nevada. If it's another commission, I don't know if they would have the same approach to it. And I don't know if push comes to shove, if Nevada will, if it does end up there. So it most likely won't unless that fight happens in October. That's the next fight in Las Vegas. So it may be another commission's problem, but it is already getting into ugly territory, and I don't think it's going to get better. I mean, I hope it does. I really don't. We don't have to. Now, I don't think anyone's going to be throwing a dolly through a bus window, but Colby, he goes low. He goes low, and I don't know what Usman's going to say back to that, but I can't imagine that Ali Abdelaziz and Kamaru Usman will take kindly to the things that Covington has already said.
Yeah, man, and I have to repeat that what I said at the beginning, where it's just like I don't know that like there are ways to navigate this where you don't have to do that, because the fight itself is actually a really fascinating fight. Like if you just look at it, they're two very similar fighters, obviously, both very heavy with their pressure, heavy clinch work against the fence, very suffocating wrestling. And it was funny to me, I mean, watching that, because I think I can be honest and say I was very surprised by how Usman Woodley went, and I wasn't alone in that regard. Watching how that fight went on Saturday and how it played out, one of my biggest takeaways from that fight was I actually turned to the gentleman who was sitting next to me on press row multiple times throughout this fight and said, I wonder if Woodley Covington would have sort of played out similarly now, because they do have very similar styles, and it seemed like that pressure style of just getting Woodley to trap himself against the fence and then clinching and just really making him work hard. That threw him off a lot, and that's exactly what Colby does as well. That Usman versus Woodley kind of changed my opinion of how I would have thought Woodley versus Covington would have gone, in a way that I really didn't expect, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, 100%. I'm intrigued by the Usman Covington matchup as well. I think that is definitely the fight to make. Does not have to go to those areas. I mean, Covington was I mean, he was somewhat entertaining this week. I'll give him credit. I mean, he didn't have to go low against like Ben Askren. You know, he called him Ben Askren. I mean, that's whatever. It's silly, but whatever. It's, you know, it's I chuckled. I'm not gonna lie. You know, Tyquil Woodley called him Marty Snoozeman. I mean, that's whatever. It's corny, but I mean, I found it a little bit more approachable than some of the stuff he was saying on Ariel's show on Monday, which was some of that stuff was a pretty big turnoff. I was like, just don't gotta go to that. You don't gotta go full xenophobia in this sport.
Yeah, and I wonder how that will be received. I wonder if that will actually make this fight feel bigger in a way that it probably shouldn't, or if that will turn fans actively away from it and make them less likely to partake in it.
I have no idea. This sport, I feel like, there's always experiments going on in this sport to see how fans are going to perceive things. And I mean, look, Colby, if you look at the numbers, man, Colby was pulling in some numbers in terms of interest this week, and there's definitely interest, good or bad. I mean, good or bad, he's been effective. Say what you will about him. He may not be as smooth as a talker as a Chael Sonnen or a Ben Askren, but the tactics that he has taken have been effective, for better or worse. And it looks like he's going to get that fight. So I don't know, man. It's going to be. I'm kind of nervous about where this is all going to lead, but I hope it doesn't go in a very bad direction. It's already kind of gone down that wrong path, and I hope it doesn't continue down that road.
Same. And last thing before we move on, I know we'll probably talk about Tyron Woodley later, but I want to throw this one out at you while it's still in my head. I know we were talking about how Usman Covington's probably next for those two.
Yeah.
What do you think about this fight next for Woodley? Robbie Lawler rematch.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was talking about that with our esteemed video director Casey Leiden on the way home. That's kind of the fight that he wants. I mean, I'd be more than okay with that. I don't know if Woodley would really necessarily want that, because he's already beaten Lawler. You know, you can't really do better than what he did to Lawler the first time at UFC 201. So I dig the idea. I just don't know if Woodley would be down for it.
To me, it feels like a perfect time for both. They're both it puts Robbie in a way where obviously that controversial finish, it doesn't impact him. It doesn't move him down in the rankings, I guess, or down in the pecking order. But throw him against a guy like Woodley, it seems like he comes out ahead too, and Woodley would be a nice bounce back. I don't know. I like it. But hey.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be down for that. I'd be down for like Woodley even maybe going down the ranks a little bit, fighting someone like an Alex Cowboy, you know, someone like that, or I mean, maybe even like the loser of Till Masvidal, something like that.
Well, hey, let's keep it going. We do have a lot of questions here. So the next one's coming from another one from M Haydock 06.
Yeah,
just monopolizing these early fighters without a scheduled fight. Hey, Bo. Hey, both. Do you know what is the latest on the following fighters and who they might fight next? And then there's a list of 6 fighters. So let's do this very quickly. Frankie Edgar. So I would be surprised, honestly, if we don't see him in an interim title fight soon against whoever is available to go at the date that the UFC wants them to go.
Yeah, most likely. From my understanding, Frankie Edgar is ready. It's just a matter of a fight that kind of makes sense. And I'm sure that he was kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with Holloway, if he was going to leave the division. So now that is kind of hashed out, and Holloway is going to move up to fight for the interim title against Dustin Poirier next month at UFC 236. I think we'll see Edgar between now and International Fight Week. I imagine Edgar will be on one of those cards.
More interim titles. Yay. Next up, Valentina Shevchenko. And I mean, the UFC tried to do Jessica Eye versus Shevchenko back in Prague a couple weeks ago. So I know for a fact that she wants to fight as soon as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if she is on the schedule soon with some kind of title defense, whether it's Jessica I or they just skip Jessica and they go to someone else.
Yeah, Valentina Shevchenko's been ready. I mean, she's been ready since like a month after that fight. I mean, she's really always ready to go. She's very willing to stay active. It's just a matter of when the UFC wants her. And I think that, like you said, there will be opportunities coming up next. I mean, I imagine she'll be in a co-main event slot on a pay-per-view. I think that's probably the most likely fit. And I mean, what really makes sense for her is probably co-main event at UFC 238 in Chicago, because there is a big Eastern European population there. She's fought there before. She's had success there before. She's got a fan base there.
That's all the way. That's all the way in June, though. She does not want to wait that long.
She does not want to wait that long, but I don't see other opportunities. 236 has their 2 title fights, the 2 interim title fights. 237 has what will probably be a co-main between Andrade and Rose Namajunas for the throwaweight title, and then 238 is next. So I don't see another opportunity for her until Chicago.
I wouldn't be stunned if she ends up on like a UFC on ESPN show or just something.
That's possible. But what the UFC has done lately is they've stacked those pay-per-view cards with 2 title fights. So I think that's most likely. But yeah, I mean, anything's on the table at this point, I imagine.
Next up is Mirsad Bektic, who was coming off of that split decision win over Ricardo Lamas from back in June. You got anything on him?
Yeah, he just posted recently on Instagram. He's been recovering from injuries, and I believe he's ready to go. And I also imagine he will be back fairly soon to the octagon. He posted on Instagram. He had an injury after that fight. I'm looking it up now, what it was.
In the meantime, I'll keep it moving.
Like a broken finger.
Oh,
yeah.
Next up is Sean O'Malley. And so he is, I think, maybe at the end of his suspension he got from Nevada. He got a 6-week suspension from Nevada. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because this is your wheelhouse, he still needs to get his USADA suspension.
Correct.
So he is still kind of in limbo there. That could actually end up being a lot longer than 6 months. So it might be a while for Shaun. Also, I mean, he just had a recent hip surgery. So I know that was a hip problem that was bothering him for a while. He was suffering from that even before he pulled out of that fight. So it might be a bit for him.
Yeah, so O'Malley tested positive for Askren, which has been a fairly popular positive for UFC fighters over the last few years since USADA came on board. That was back it was in the fall, so I want to say September. And he was supposed to fight on that October 6th UFC 229 card, and he announced himself that he was out for the failed drug test. Nevada suspended him 6 months, and that is pretty much up this week. But USADA has not made any decision yet, and basically what is going to need to happen is that O'Malley is going to have to show USADA via testing of supplements that he took a supplement that was tainted. And from my understanding, he's not done that yet. If he's able to do that and show that this particular supplement that he was taking had that Askren in it, he will get a shortened, reduced suspension, and that could be coming anytime now. But if he's not able to do that, he could be facing a 2-year suspension, and of course, no one wants that. But it's kind of up to him and his supplements, and if he's able to find out that they were tainted. So I guess fingers crossed for O'Malley getting back in there. Had so much momentum, it's a shame.
So ridiculous that he can get suspended from 2 different entities entirely and have them be completely different punishments. But that's neither here nor there. Luke Rockhold is the next one. I don't know. What you got anything on Luke?
Yeah, where's he at? I mean, I think he's really just waiting for an opportunity at 205 that makes sense for him. I think that's really what it was. Remember, he was supposed to fight Chris Weidman back in the fall, and that fell through. He got injured. Yeah, I mean, he wants to be at 205. He said that multiple times. It's just a matter of finding the matchup that makes sense for him, and I guess he hasn't been offered that yet. But as far as I know, he's healthy and ready to go.
Yeah, and towards the end of last year, he had said that his light heavyweight was the next thing for him. He had already made his mind up that middleweight was done, and he wanted to come back early in 2019. He was targeting March, but I mean that obviously didn't end up happening. So I think he really is just waiting for that right fight. We'll see. And then the last one is Gegard Mousasi, who I believe is still recovering from injury.
Yeah, he's gonna be out for a little bit, right?
Yeah, he's probably going to be out for a little bit, which is unfortunate because he wanted to have a really big year. But hopefully we'll get him back sooner rather than later. Let's keep it moving though.
Seems like they're kind of moving the middleweight division, not on without him, but they kind of Bellator kind of scrapped the initial plans to have him fight Lovato Jr. If he wins, then he fights Machida. Now Machida, according to a story last week by Ariel Helwani, Machida is fighting Chael Sonnen. So that could kind of gum up the works a little bit for as far as what they planned and what Gegard had planned. But if Chael Sonnen does beat Machida, I'm sure that, you know, Gegard versus Chael Sonnen could be very interesting too if that does happen down the line.
I mean, that would have to be a 205 though. There's no way Chael's making it 185 anytime soon.
I mean, Musasi's been open to fighting at 205, but yeah, that fight is at 205. That's a good point. Machida Sonnen is at 205, so Machida's not even fighting in the middleweight division next. So it seems like they had a plan, but they had to kind of go against it because Musasi's injured.
Yeah, and Musasi, the wild man, before he got injured, he was talking to me about how he wanted to fight at heavyweight next. So yeah. I think that guy's up for anything whenever he's back. But hey, let's keep it moving. Next one's coming from Will Flinton on the MMA Fighting page, who wants to know who are the top 5 fighters that have the best chance, whether at light heavyweight or heavyweight, to beat Jon Jones? Who poses the greatest threat? Do you think he'll ever lose? And he writes, I badly want to see Jones versus DC3 at heavyweight. It is 2 of the greatest of all time, and one of those pay-per-view fights I will gladly hand my money over to watch. It would also be an interesting twist at heavyweight where DC might be better without the hard cut. Not might, he definitely is. And he finishes with, there are some interesting young future Jones opponents, but they probably aren't seasoned enough to give Jones a competitive fight. Thoughts on Rockholder Romero's potential chances? So basically, Mark, this question is more or less asking us, who are the top 5 guys you would like to see Jon Jones fight if you're looking for somebody to beat Jon Jones? If you're making a list of 5 guys who could potentially beat Jon Jones, who is on your list? Do you want to kind of just go one at a time?
Yeah. I'll go down the list of 5. I have 5 names in my head.
Same.
Ready?
All right.
1.
Go for it.
Jon Jones. 2. Jon Jones. Jon Jones. 4. Jon Jones. 5. Jon Jones. Those are the top 5 people who can defeat Jon Jones. Everyone else is 6 through 100.
Well done. Well done. Well, aside from the obvious there, I will say my 5. I would say Daniel Cormier at heavyweight. That would be the one that I want to see the most. If you just give me one of anybody on this list, that would be it. I've said it 1,000 times on the show, but I just feel like that series is not resolved, and I would like to see that fight in Daniel Cormier's natural element. Yoel Romero at 205. That would just be interesting, man. I think you and I both share a fascination for that man, and seeing him against Jon Jones, the contrast in body types for that fight would be just fascinating, just to see on a pure visual level. Then my other 3 would all be heavyweights. I think Francis Ngannou, Cain Velasquez, and Stipe Miocic all have certain qualities about them. Francis Ngannou obviously has a death touch, as we saw with Cain Velasquez, sparking out a guy with that much space to throw an uppercut. And I think Cain and Stipe both have the nice mix of elite heavyweight wrestling and pressure, while also having a striking background to give Jon some kind of fits.
I don't think Jon Jones moves to heavyweight unless he's fighting Brock Lesnar.
I agree with you.
My opinion, because that is big money. Big money. That's $1 million. That's $1 million pay-per-view buy type of card.
I 100% agree with you. And if anything, this past week in Las Vegas illustrated that clearer to me than it's ever been before. I mean, Jon was asked about heavyweight a bunch of different times throughout the week, and that was more or less, as the week got on, it became more and more apparent that he's not doing that unless the UFC either gives him millions and millions of dollars or it's Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, and I think light heavyweight, I think he's gonna stick there. I can see him fighting Thiago Santos next. I think that actually makes a lot of sense for the UFC 237 main event in Rio, because they don't have one right now. It was supposed to be Amanda Nunes against someone. And I mean, unless they can make something work with Nunes versus Cyborg, I don't think Nunes is fighting on that card. She doesn't want to fight on that card. She wants to fight later in the year. So that
like that though. I like the Jones Santos fight like that.
I do too. And you know what? And sorry to interrupt you. I think that Jon Jones going down to Rio and fighting in Brazil for the first time would be a massive deal. I think they would love him. They would love him down there.
It would be very similar to when Ronda Rousey went down there to fight Betch Correia. I just like the idea of Rose is doing it with Jessica Andrade. It just the American going down there and trying to defend their title in enemy territory. That's something at this point, we have seen Jon Jones in our life for so long that I just want to see him in new type of environments, new type of exchanges, just new type of situations. And that type of situation is something we have never seen from Jon Jones, him being in enemy territory like that. That would be fascinating to watch. And also, in a way, Thiago Santos is kind of like the Rumble fight we never got with him.
Yeah, I mean, on a different plane. I don't think he's quite as dangerous as Rumble, but he is certainly a very, very dangerous guy. I'd expect Jon Jones to win that fight, but Thiago Santos is a freaking wild man. That's gonna be a fight like that. Thiago Santos is not in boring fights.
Yeah,
he's killer be killed. Thiago Santos.
Yeah.
Let's move on from there. Another one from Will Flinton. I think we touched on this a little bit last week, so we can go by it pretty quick. But thoughts on PFL moving to ESPN seems pretty big for that promotion. I was highly entertained by the PFL season 1, fun fights and great production quality. I also was intrigued by the playoff format. I was also pleasantly surprised to hear the move to ESPN. Was the UFC consulted about this, and are they mad about it? Is the PFL going to turn into the minor leagues for the UFC? If so, it would be ironic that some of the PFL champions will be making more money there than they would on the UFC roster.
Yeah, we addressed this last week quite a bit, actually, so probably going to skip through most of it. But I mean, I enjoyed what PFL did for its inaugural season. I mean, it's just something different, right? Like that's in this space at this point where we're so inundated with fights and there's no off season, and every single week there's something new that we have to move on to. I enjoy any promotion that can try to do something different, and somebody who's just not going to try to be the B league for the UFC, someone who's not going to try to be UFC light. PFL did something different. Some aspects of it worked. Some aspects of it definitely didn't. I think the tiebreaker system, where if you won the first round, that's kind of the tiebreaker. That was very silly. I think they could tweak aspects of that. But for the most part, it was an enjoyable tournament. And also you got these guys who ended up getting paid $1 million, who definitely would not have ever made a payday like that in their entire life. So, hey, man, it's all good for everybody. I don't know if the UFC was consulted about the PFL moving to ESPN deal, but I don't feel like they're threatened by it either. If anything, that's an indication that ESPN is going all in on MMA, which is only good for the sport.
I think what PFL did the best this well, I guess last year now is they kind of answered the question that the UFC has a hard time answering on a regular basis, and that question is, why are these two people fighting? Why are they fighting each other? And sometimes there are fights. Actually, I would say most fights on a UFC card, especially on a fight night card, I don't know why they're fighting. I don't know what the stakes are. Are there any stakes? In the PFL, there are very, very firm, hashed out stakes. You know exactly what happens when someone wins. When they win in the regular season, in the first round, second round, there's a point system, there's a playoff format. There are stakes. You know what everyone is fighting for. Everyone's kind of fighting for the same thing in each division, and that is a chance at that $1 million purse at the end of the year. And I think that in and of itself is a draw to some fans. I know the numbers were not that great on NBC Sports Network. I think that being on ESPN will definitely help them. I mean, it's instant credibility for PFL. If they even talk for 1 second about PFL on SportsCenter or one of those big shows on ESPN, that is a huge victory.
That is huge. You cannot overstate how huge that is. The ESPN controls the sports landscape on such a way that even just anecdotally over the last several months, I've had friends who don't care whatsoever about MMA start hitting me up about MMA because they see it on the ticker at the bottom or they see some highlights on SportsCenter or whatever. If PFL can even be mentioned in that conversation, that you cannot overstate how big that is for them.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, next question is a Marc Raimondi specialty that's coming from our good friend Stonerhead, who brings it every week. Jon Jones media scrum. Hey, Marc and Shaun. In one of the media scrums for UFC 235, Jon stated that another UFC fighter was dealing with the exact same situation with USADA that Jon is, pulsing and picograms. Does the media know who this other fighter is, and why does it not get reported or no one cares because they don't have a name like Jon Jones? Or was Jon just throwing people under the bus without giving them any names? And I say, how dare you, Stonerhead? My man, Marc Raimondi, is all over this. You are not paying attention to his reporting. I give you the floor.
Come on, Stonerhead. I know that you're a loyal listener and viewer of the A side, but you're obviously not following me on Twitter. I've been all over the M3 metabolite story for 2 months now. So, and I reported on this just a few days ago. So we know of at least 3 fighters in the UFC currently going through this issue with the M3 long-term metabolite of oral turinabol. Same thing that Jon Jones is going through. I should say 3 others in addition to Jon Jones, where it's showing up in some tests, not showing up in other tests at a very, very small amount in the low picogram level, and it's pulsing, you know, as they say, where it's in some, it's not in others. The one that we knew last year during the whole Jon Jones thing was Grant Dawson, who actually, ironically enough, fights at UFC Wichita on Saturday. I'll have a story this week about Grant Dawson and his experience with this whole thing later on this week. I also this past, I guess it was Monday, I wrote about Muslim Salikov, who tested positive for the oral turinabol M3 metabolite back last year, I guess, yeah, in like May 2018, and he had the same phenomenon where tested for it. It was the long-term metabolite. Then he went a few tests without testing for it. Then it popped up again in the system at a very, very low level. We're talking about single-digit picogram per milliliter levels. That's even far less than what Jon Jones is testing for. And USADA cleared him. They cleared Grant Dawson. They cleared Muslim Salikov. Basically, what they're saying is that we know so little about when these athletes could have ingested that substance. It could have been even more than a year before they came into the UFC. They came under the USADA program, so we cannot sanction them because they could have taken this like 2 years ago before it was even on the radar they were going to be in the UFC, and it's not giving them any kind of performance enhancing benefits. So that's what they found with Grant Dawson. That's what they found with Muslim Salikov, and it's similar to what Jon Jones. It's pretty much the exact same thing, only Jon Jones was initially suspended for this in July 2017, which is before they really knew about this. This is brand new. This is only in the last 18 months where USADA is seeing this as the tests have gotten more sensitive. You know, they're coming back, you know, to the low picogram level, which they weren't before. So this is kind of a new phenomenon, and it's going to change, I think, the way that we look at some of these things moving forward. I think what USADA is doing now, they're setting a precedent worldwide in anti-doping as to how to treat these situations where it's a low level, it's a long-term metabolite. They don't know when it got there. They don't know how it got there. It's all brand new stuff, and it's a lot of stuff that, look, I mean, you and I, it's confusing to us. It's so confusing to fans, it's confusing to fighters. It's confusing to doping scientists. They don't even know what is going on yet with this stuff. It's all kind of developing. It's new science. The only peer-reviewed study on this is from 2011, and that says that it only stays in someone's system between 40 and 50 days. And the head of the Smyrtle WADA lab in Salt Lake City, Dr. Daniel Eichner, he testified at the Nevada hearing for Jones that we already know that's wrong. We know that study is wrong already based on what we're seeing in these new tests. So it's Jon Jones, to make a long story short, or to make a short story long. We know Jon Jones, now we know Grant Dawson and Muslim Salikov, and there's at least one more UFC fighter, according to Jeff Nowitzki, who's also going through this now. We don't know who this person is yet because the investigation from USADA has not been completed. So we'll find out whenever that does get completed. But this is a whole brand new type of thing. And Jon Jones is kind of like patient zero in this new doping phenomenon. It's fascinating and confusing at the same time.
So in other words, get it together, Stonerhead. Pay attention to Marc Raimondi's reporting.
Right. Long story short, come on. Come on.
Well, hey, let's keep things moving. Next question is coming from Bonaleye? Bonaleye?
I don't know.
I hope I'm saying something correctly. Question from Marc. This is a joke question. Who is the GOAT with an asterisk next to his name? Is it John Picogram Jones or Anderson Silva? And does a win over Anthony Smith do anything for Jones's legacy? Thank you. Keep up the good work, Shaun. Hey, thank you for that.
I like how he tells you to keep up the good work, basically saying that I'm not doing good work.
I also like that. That makes me, again, I've been sick for like 5 days. That makes me feel a little better.
That was some shade by Bonaleye. I don't think anyone has an asterisk next to their name. I don't buy that. You don't think Jon Jones is the greatest of all time in my eyes, and I I've said that many times.
Wait. So, okay, I understand your obsession with John Jones, but Anderson Silva, who fails multiple drug tests over here, you don't give him an asterisk either.
I don't give anyone an asterisk. No, no one's got one.
I give you an asterisk for not giving asterisks.
Oh, come on. Does a win over Anthony Smith do anything for Jones' legacy? I mean, not.
It keeps it going. It keeps it going.
Yeah, it shows like that incredible consistency. It just further cements that this guy is just on another level. I mean,
we saw it with Tyron Woodley, because
exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Anybody can go out there, no matter how dominant you are, no matter how many perfect performances, flawless performances you have in a row. Anybody can go out there and have a really bad night where it's just not working for you and you just can't figure it out. And the fact that John Jones has been able to evade that throughout his entire career and never even get to a point other than maybe the Gustafsson fight, where he is the first Gustafsson fight, where he has even had to face that idea. That alone is just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more to say about John Jones, but he's say what you will, talking about asterisks and picograms, but what the guy's been able to do, his body of work. I mean, it's crazy that this is like his third comeback, and he's better than he's ever been. I mean, he's lost nothing. In fact, he's gained more. I mean, he hasn't been able to fight consistently over the last 3 years, really, and the guy is better than ever. It's uncanny.
And it's also interesting to me to watch what he does to opponents in there, even when he's not being excessively violent, right? Because we saw it on Saturday. He didn't like really badly mess up Anthony Smith, but he dominated him in every single second of that fight. And then we saw Anthony Smith in the afterwards in the post-fight presser just being so frustrated with himself and not understanding how he got sucked into this into just this John Jones void, right? Where he was staring at John and he just couldn't get himself going. That's what John does, man. He is able to manipulate you in there in such a way that you just don't even understand why you're fighting the way you're fighting, and it's frankly incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on from there. I'm gonna skip over. We talked about Shaun O'Malley already. He's from Black Aces MMA, so we kind of
yes.
We sorry, that whole thing already. Sorry, Black Aces.
Sorry, Black Aces. We'll get you next time.
Moving on to Matt the Donk. Mickey Gall. Does he belong in the UFC? Will he ever belong in the UFC?
Ouch.
Getting finished by a much smaller guy who hadn't finished anyone in a decade can't be good for the ego. Not trying to take anything away from Diego Sanchez, who's an OG, but didn't that fight make it clear that Gall doesn't really belong in the UFC? We tend to think of Mickey as very young, and obviously he can still get better, but he's actually 27, older than I thought before I looked it up. Max, Kevin Lee, Till, etc. are all younger than him and pretty far along with their careers at this point. 3 to 4 years from now, do you think Gall is a contender, or will we just remember him as the CM Punk guy?
So I'll preface everything I'm about to say by adding that, or noting, I guess I should say, that 27 doesn't mean anything. Like 27 in fight years doesn't actually mean anything. What you actually need to look at is his resume and his record and how much experience he has. He's only had 7 fights. So he could be 27, he could be 23, he could be 30. It doesn't matter. It's how many years of mileage do you have on you, and he still is very, very early in his career. So I will say that. But let me ask you, Mark. I'm gonna put you on the spot. When do you think the last time Diego Sanchez got a knockout or a TKO finish was, and who do you think it was against?
Man, I'm drawing a blank.
You're never gonna get it. You're never gonna get it unless you know it.
He didn't finish Clay Guida, right?
No. You're in the right era, though. Luigi Figavore. I can never say this dude's last name.
Fioravante.
Figavore. Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
You got to go back all the way to that guy in 2008.
Wow.
2008, man. That is not a good look for Mickey Gall, certainly, especially into the fight. I mean, I spoke to him about how much he was going to show no mercy to Diego Sanchez, and this was an idols become rivals type of thing. It's a very tough look for Mickey Gall, who definitely has momentum slowed over the past couple of years. I mean, his first year in the UFC, he goes 3-0. He beats CM Punk. He ends up, going in there against Sage Northcutt he looked like someone to watch, and then injuries and just all this time off has really slowed him down. He's now suffered two pretty bad losses in the UFC. What do you think? Where you think we're at with him?
I don't know, man. Look, first of all, I don't want to take anything away from Diego Sanchez because I think he looked great, and I think it was just as much of Diego Sanchez as it was Mickey Gall on Saturday night. I think Diego is great at welterweight, and if you think about it, when he commits to wrestling and grappling, he doesn't lose many fights.
Yeah,
Diego. He does not lose many fights.
Sorry to interrupt, but in hindsight, that was a very, very tough style matchup for Mickey Gall, who is predominantly a grappler.
Right. I mean, look at the guys that have beaten them. It's all been on the feet for the most part. I mean,
you're talking about Diego.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with some exceptions, of course, Joe Lozon, and then of course he had that run at featherweight and he lost to Ricardo Lamas. I mean, featherweight was it just didn't make sense. But I mean, at welterweight, the dude is just super. I mean, he's durable at 55. He's ridiculously durable at welterweight. He's small, but he's durable. He still has great wrestling. He still has great grappling. He's just so tough and just insane. He's just a crazy dude. You gotta go back and whoever is watching, go back and watch Diego Sanchez's post-fight scrum from Saturday. I mean, he's
22 minutes of it.
He's talking about. I mean, I would have talked to him for an hour. I mean, he's just talking about some crazy stuff and training with Iceman Wim Hof, who I had no idea who that guy was, but Google him. Very interesting guy. He has like Guinness World Records for just crazy feats of endurance. Like I think Diego said that he climbed Mount Everest in his underwear. I don't even know why that's a thing, but I'm all about it. I'm all about crazy Diego Sanchez. I want Diego to be just himself. I think he was trying to hold in his crazy for a little bit. No, just go wild. Go wild, Diego.
My favorite aspect of that whole conversation with Diego afterwards was him talking about how he was training by walking out in thunderstorms and channeling the power of thunderstorms. Like,
hey man, look, I love it.
I know that the fight game and any sort of combat sports brings crazy, just inherently insane individuals to it, but God damn, am I so glad that Diego Sanchez is still in our life, man. And I have to say, I am so impressed with the 9 lives of this guy, that the 9 lives that this guy has seemingly had to have. Because if you go back to 2017, he's coming in, he got knocked out back-to-back first-round knockouts, and actually 3 of his last 4 had been really bad first-round knockouts where he was just knocked out clean, and it looked like we had seen the end of Diego Sanchez. And he turns right around and wins 2 fights in a row now and is kind of just back in sort of just the conversation of being a legitimate welterweight UFC fighter. It's crazy to me that this guy's been around basically the entirety of the UFC's lifespan as a mainstream entity and is still going. Like, how is that possible? That shouldn't be possible, especially with the amount of wars that he has been in. Him and Robbie Lawler and Jeremy Stephens, all 3 of them, these guys have just kept it going, just like we had talked about last week, and it is ridiculously impressive.
There's also something to say about the level of competition. I mean, if you look at the guys that he has lost to, they've all been pretty legit guys. So in many ways, he is a fantastic gatekeeper in multiple divisions. Although he says he wants to win the UFC welterweight title, that's what he said he wants to do. I mean, I'm not gonna tell him he can't. I mean, he's 37, but he looks good. I mean, he's fought very well. He's super tough. I mean,
he's channeling that thunderstorm anti-aging process.
Channeling Iceman Wim Hof. He's gonna climb Mount Everest in his underwear. I don't know who's next for him. What makes sense for Diego next?
If I gave you odds if I just threw it out to you, name one UFC fighter who's gonna climb Mount Everest in his underwear, the overwhelming favorite odds would definitely be Diego Sanchez, right?
Absolutely, 100%, no doubt. He's the guy.
Well, hey,
who does he get next? I mean, I don't know.
Probably another up-and-comer, man. This is where he is at this point. They're just going to keep throwing him to guys who are going to try to build a name off himself. And he seems to be motivated by that, the idea of you want to come for my name? You picked
Right.
the wrong guy. Like, that seems to really get him going right now at this point in his career. So, hey, if he's okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's keep things moving, man. Next question is coming from Will Flinton. Again, this is the third question for him.
On a roll.
We gotta impose some limitations here at some point. Who is the most interesting character or personality in MMA that 99% of fans don't know about yet? Okay, that's an interesting question on this, putting us on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm not asking about the best prospect or the best fighter, but who is one of the most interesting fighters that many of us don't know about yet, and someone you'd like to write a feature piece about down the road. One of my favorite things about MMA is the interesting personalities that the sport attracts. Example, John Gunther from Tough, such a hilarious and odd dude. Mitch Aguilar, who fights for LFA, is another interesting guy, former Navy SEAL, owns his own supplements and apparel company, very fan-friendly fighting style. Is Will Flinton secretly Mitch Aguilar in disguise?
It's possible.
I think that might be a thing. But okay, so who is the most interesting character or personality you would like to do something with down the road? Kind of putting us on the spot here, but one that jumps out to me at least, and it's not somebody that people won't know. It's definitely somebody that has been around the game. But after speaking to him like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago in Phoenix, Alex Caceres is endlessly fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations that you can have with that man and where they will end up are endless. The possibilities seem endless to me. I would just like to go and hang out with him on his farm for like a week and just breathe it in and just soak it all in and see what happens and write about that. That seemed like that would be a very cool experience.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are, asking for someone outside the UFC is real tough. I mean, the UFC has the market share of fighters. I would say, off the top of my head, I would say someone who's actually now apparently just got signed to the UFC, Julia Avila from Invicta. She's a very fascinating person. She's kind of kooky in a good way. I'd be interested in her. Were you gonna say something, Shaun?
Yeah, I got one more came to mind. I would definitely also like to do something at some point down the road with Henry Corrales. I think that guy's got stories. Yeah. That guy seems like he's got stories that I want to hear.
Absolutely, I agree, and I mean, it's to the kind of detriment of Aaron Pico, but I like that Henry Corrales is finally kind of getting the respect and the publicity that he deserves, because he is a very interesting guy in many ways, and he doesn't want to quite let the cat out of the bag as far as some of those stories growing up on the streets of East LA, but hopefully one day he does, and I'm sure there's a lot to tell.
Yeah. Well, hey,
I would say even anyone like in Ryzen, and like there's a lot of fascinating people like in Ryzen, and even Andy Wen, Andrea Lee's regular corner and friend and teammate. She's a very fascinating person. Her walkout last year in Ryzen was probably the best walkout I've ever seen in my life. The Michael Jackson walkout, that was incredible. So there's a ton of people in MMA.
Honestly, you mentioned one championship. I think there's probably endless amount of stories there to mine if you're really like dedicated to it, because a lot of those fighters come from countries where this isn't really a thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like, how did you figure this out? What's your day-to-day life like? Like, I don't know. I think a lot of that would probably be interesting.
100%. Could not agree more.
All right. Keep it moving from another one from Matt the Donk, who wants to know about Anthony Smith and a decision he made in the main event. Anthony Smith declining to accept a DQ win against Jones, an incredibly noble act or totally irrational? As a fight fan, I obviously applaud Anthony for not taking the easy way out and continuing to fight. Having Jones lose by DQ in a fight he was clearly winning would be the most unsatisfying result possible. It would be a cheap victory, and I doubt anyone would really consider Anthony the champ. On the other hand, I'm surprised that Anthony essentially passed on a win bonus, future fight with Jones, and whatever other riches would have come his way by taking the DQ and the belt. He gave up something like $500,000 plus a lot more than beer. LOL. What would y'all have done? So that is an interesting, multifaceted question, I would say. So I'll start here. Anthony Smith was not going to get a win bonus for that fight. So that's a very small note for it, but he was on a no-win bonus purse. So he was going to get paid the same regardless. He definitely did not do himself a favor with future earnings, though, because if he wins that fight, especially in that way, they booked the rematch ASAP. He'll then get pay-per-view points for the rematch because he'll be the champion. That's at least $1 million payday that he left on the table. But, man, you have to respect Anthony Smith so damn much for his decision that he made in the cage on Saturday, because he very much could have taken that easy way out. And I think 99% of people would have. Hell, you put me in that spot, I'm probably taking that way out too, just after getting destroyed by John Jones for 4 rounds. Like, I'm probably just taking the win at that point. But man, that just really speaks to something that we have talked about about Anthony Smith throughout his rise, is just the character that guy exudes. Incredible character, an incredibly classy dude for the sport. And hey man, you can do nothing but respect what he did on Friday. He could have taken the easy way out, and he did not.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony Smith is a guy that he's worked so hard and so long to be the guy who won the UFC title on like a technicality. He's just worked too hard. He's been through so many wars. He's not going to want to win the belt that way. And I respect that. And I think the guy is all class. I mean, I thought that the way he handled himself all week was fantastic. I mean, I can't say enough good things about Anthony Smith. What can you say really bad about Anthony Smith? I mean, the guy is just a good dude, just a solid man. And yeah, I mean, that guy is just not in his character to take the win like that. And I don't think he should have. I think, look, I mean, if he legitimately could not have continued, if it was that bad of a blow that ended the fight, of course. I mean, if you're concussed, of course, do not go back in there and fight John Jones, because that's dangerous to your health. But if it was not that bad of a blow and you could legitimately continue, I think he did the right thing. You don't want to win that way. I said it on the post-fight show that night. Like, he almost took one for the sport, in a sense, because could you imagine how crazy things would have been if Anthony Smith won the UFC title on a disqualification and Jones got disqualified? I mean, we're talking about a career for John Jones of just weird things, weird ways of losing the belt without actually losing a fight, in a legitimate way. So I think the entire sport owes a little bit of a debt to Anthony Smith,
especially with the way that night went. Just following the Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren controversy, if you end that night, the night already felt weird in a way that is, I guess, hard to articulate. At least in the arena, it felt weird. And if you end it on that, especially after Ben and Robbie did what they did with Herb Dean, man, that would have been a rough night for the sport. So you're 100% right.
Yeah. Let's move on to Ted Bear. This is the first time Ted Bear has gotten a comment in.
I don't know why that name made me laugh, but I like it.
Ali Abdelaziz. Can you explain what fighters like Usman and Khabib see in him? Of course, he's their manager. Is he that influential to many fans? It's perplexing why anyone would hire him. He seems to have a sketchy past, sketchy friends, and a knack for inciting violence. Have you talked to him in person? Affable guy or repulsive personality? Well, to answer the latter question, talk to him in person. Yeah, all the time. I mean, on a consistent basis, in person, on the phone. I mean, I guess there's an easy answer to this. He does pretty good for his guys. I mean,
well, that's the answer, right? Like, what's the job of a manager? Because we obviously we're in the media, we see people talk about this, and fans always wonder about this. But ultimately, what's the job of a manager, right? It's to get a fighter paid. It's to get a fighter opportunities. Ali Abdelaziz gets his fighters paid. Whatever else you want to say about the man, he gets his fighters paid. Very good payouts, especially for this sport, and he gets his fighters opportunities that I think others definitely do not. I mean, you just look at the last year for his client base. A lot of those guys have fought for the title. Many of them are champions now. Many of them,
3 champions, and if Gastelum wins the interim title, that'll be 4 champions.
And those are all recent champions.
All recent.
Especially you look at situations like Usman, who's able to get that shot over a Colby Covington, or you look at that situations like Henry Cejudo, who was able to get that Dillashaw fight. There are a lot of situations. Not even. I should rewind further than that. But Henry Cejudo, who got the DJ rematch, when I guess a lot of people were wondering if he even deserved that. There are a lot of situations where Ali Abdelaziz is able to get these guys really great opportunities. And if you're a fighter, that's all you care about. You care about getting that shot because, like Usman said, you just need that shot. Once you get that shot, then you can make change your life in one night. And now Kamaru Usman is the UFC welterweight champion, and I don't think anybody saw that coming 8 months ago. So the man gets his fighters opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, say what you will, and you know, there are some things that he does that I disagree with. Not a fan of the Ramzan Kadyrov stuff, some of the photos that he posts and that type of stuff. But I mean, if the question is why do guys want him as their manager, you already answered it, because you do all right for the most part when he's your manager.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked to Ali, and Ali is. I mean, I believe he said to me multiple times, like, I never said I was a saint. Like, he's like, I never said I was a saint. All I said is I'm gonna fight for my clients, and that's, I mean, that has rung true.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much a guy that you would want on your side rather than against your side.
yes, that's correct.
Well, hey, let's keep it moving. For another one coming from Stonerhead. My man. How big of a star can Ben become? I have to say Ben Askren personality and attitude has, okay, that was hard to start with. I have to say Ben Askren's personality and attitude has won me over. His constant digs at Dana, the whole Marty from Nebraska thing, and the fact that his fight with Robbie was just crazy. But at one point I thought Robbie was out, and then Robbie was, you gotta lay off the weights.
Is living up to his name.
You gotta, don't rip the bong so hard before you write these questions. At one point I thought Ben was out, then I thought Robbie was out from the choke. Crazy fight. If you are the UFC, what do you do next with Ben and Robbie? I'd love to see the rematch, but I also want to see Ben fight the winner of Till Masvidal. P.S. What goodies did Marc bring back from Japan for you, Shaun? Oh, my man, remembering. Marc brought back a couple t-shirts that I really dug. I ended up wearing one of them actually on fight week, I think, for weigh-ins.
You look great in that t-shirt, Shaun.
And thank you again for that, Mr. Raimondi.
It was a Minoru Suzuki t-shirt.
I love it.
Minoru Suzuki, former, co-founder of Pancrase, former king of Pancrase, legend in MMA and pro wrestling.
Speaking of terrifying men,
all-time badass.
Yeah. But hey,
yeah,
Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren was maybe the wildest, like 2 minute and 30-second fight I can remember in like recent memory. Although I guess like right before it, Pedro Munoz and Cody Garbrandt just had a barn burner as well. But man, good Lord, the roller coaster that we went on for those about 3 minutes with those two guys was crazy. And the one biggest takeaway from me, that I get, maybe not takeaway, but a thing that surprised me about last week is I expected Ben Askren, whenever he made his UFC debut, to make an impact. I expected people to care. I expected there to be good numbers. Ben Askren's numbers all week did better than any other person's numbers the entire week. His numbers did better than John Jones and Tyron Woodley's numbers combined, more or less, on a lot of like the different metrics that we have. And that was stunning to me, man. I knew it would be big, but I don't think I even underestimated how big it would be. And at this point, it is apparent. It seems very, very apparent that he could be an actual star in the UFC if he is able to continue to win and get in these good matchups and win entertaining fights. Because I don't know. I mean, obviously, the controversy that surrounded that fight wasn't ideal. But other than that, Ben Askren basically had the perfect debut week in the UFC.
I completely agree. I mean, it was, you know what? I even think that the controversial finish works in his favor.
I agree.
Because he showed you can't take anything away from him as far as his determination and his perseverance and his resilience. That's for sure. And the controversy kind of just adds more fuel to his fire. It only because it's not his fault. I mean, the finish was not his fault. If you do object to that finish, you're not blaming Ben Askren. You're blaming Herb Dean, which is what you should do. It's not him. It's not Ben Askren. He did everything he could in that fight. And as far as I personally don't want to see a rematch. I mean, look, would I watch it if it happened? Of course. I mean, it would be another completely insane fight, and I'd be curious to see what that would look like. But to me, I feel like both guys come out looking good of UFC 235. No one lost in my mind. I feel like both guys actually have a high stock coming off that card, and it doesn't make sense to me to kind of dampen that by doing it again. I think that both of them should go in different directions, and both of them should have high-profile fights next. And Askren wants to fight the Darren Till versus Masvidal winner, and I think that especially if Darren Till wins, I think Till versus Askren will be a very entertaining lead-up.
Oh man, even Masvidal would though too. Masvidal could talk.
Masvidal definitely would as well. Of course, those guys will definitely say some stuff to each other without a doubt. And both of those fights would be extremely entertaining and fascinating. I mean, I would be interested to see how if Askren would be able to impose his wrestling will on a Till or a Masvidal. I mean, but I'm down for almost anything involving Ben Askren after UFC 235. I think that's the point, and I think that's what he's done very well. People are invested in him, and that is hard to do in this day and age when there's 43 fight cards a year in the UFC, 13 fights per card. He's cut through the white noise, and he has indeed become somewhat of a star.
Yeah, and even like you said, even if I understand he has his haters, and I understand that the ending to that fight on Saturday left some people unsatisfied. But even if you're unsatisfied by that, and even if you don't like Ben Askren, you have to acknowledge that that man is one of the toughest son of a bitches around, because the hellacious beating that he suffered over the first minute 30 of that fight, I don't know that I don't know that 99.9% of fighters don't end up losing that fight at that point. When you get spiked onto your neck, basically, by Robbie Lawler, and then the punches that he suffered afterwards, I thought Herb Dean was going to stop that fight in the moment. I genuinely still don't understand how Ben Askren survived that first opening salvo, because it was just ridiculous.
Dude, I mean, that slam was scary. I mean,
Esther's photo. Our own Esterlin's photo of that slam, when he is just like perpendicular basically to the floor, and it's just, you see his neck is about to just become crunched into dust. Like, I just don't even understand how he doesn't have a broken neck.
It could have literally been fatal. I mean, that could have been real bad. That was frightening. And Askren said it on the MMA Hour on Monday with Luke Thomas, that Robbie Lawler, like the strength and explosiveness is like among the few he's ever felt. And this is a guy who is an Olympic level wrestler. So that just shows you where Robbie Lawler is at 36 years old after freaking knee surgery. What a mutant that guy is. So again, I mean, sign me up for whatever is next for both those guys. I will be very, very interested in whatever is the next opponent.
Yeah, agreed. And just so I can quickly answer the question that was asked, I would also like to see Ben Askren versus the winner of Till Masvidal. I think that there's a good storyline regardless of who he is. We've waited so long to see Ben Askren in the UFC. I just don't want to see him. And if you would have asked me immediately after that Robbie Lawler fight, I would have said, yeah, let's do the rematch. But given some distance from it, we've waited too long for this. I don't want to see this guy's fights wasted on things I've already seen at this point. That fight was cool. Let's let it stand alone as that one thing. If they come back and rematch each other down the line, that's great. But right now, I want to see Ben Askren versus as many different people as possible. I'd love to see him get the winner of that London fight. And I've already said, I think Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley, the rematch, that would be a really interesting fight right now, and the right place for both these guys' careers to do it.
Also, looking down the line, and I know what Askren said on Monday about having to get Tyron Woodley's blessing, but let's say Kamaru Usman beats Colby Covington. That is most likely the next fight. And then Askren beats the winner of Till Masvidal. We're talking about possibly Ben Askren fighting for a UFC title in the year of our Lord 2019 or 2020. That is pretty wild.
And he already has built-in storylines with both Usman and Covington. He has already laid the groundwork for that. I would be there for either of those fights.
Yeah, and you know what? He could win. He could win.
Oh, those are two very advantageous style matchups for Ben Askren.
Yeah, man, the welterweight division. God, who knew? Who knew that Ben Askren would be the injection that the welterweight division? It was already great, but now it's like I'm salivating over the possibilities. Not literally.
All right, calm down. We'll get to Johnny Walker later.
Yeah, where are all my Johnny Walker questions? Come on, guys.
We got some on Twitter, so we'll hit this last green question on MMA Fight, and then we'll get to Twitter because we are running late, but we're gonna just get to as many as we can. Who cares? We'll go late. Who cares? This show has given me new life, Marc Raimondi. I have been sick for 5 days, and all of a sudden, I feel reborn.
Yeah, you feel you're gonna feel terrible after the show, though.
Oh, geez.
So hard, really suck.
Well, hey, this last one's coming from Matt the Donk, who wants to know about Cody Garbrandt.
Yes,
and man, Who saw this coming? After the Dominic Cruz fight, I think a lot of us, including the UFC, thought Cody was on a rocket ship to being a superstar. What happened? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. Is it his chin? Poor fight IQ? Where does he go from here? And Cody Garbrandt, man, losing in the first round to Pedro Munoz over the weekend. Third straight knockout loss. It was the same story once again for Cody Garbrandt. He comes in, gets sucked into a brawl, and then gets dropped in the middle of a brawl. What I mean, watching that in the moment, what are you thinking? Where's your takeaways now? A couple days removed from it.
When both of those guys just started swinging, I was thinking to myself, Cody, what are you doing, man? Like, why? It's not. You don't got to do all that. He
can't help himself.
Necessary.
He just can't help himself.
I mean, it's almost like he went back to fighting in a parking lot in Ohio, probably like in his younger days as like a teen. He just went into a brawl and look, I mean, it's a fan friendly style, but it's not a style conducive to what Cody Garbrandt wants to accomplish in MMA. I mean, this is a guy who wants to be an all-time great. And he was on that trajectory not too long ago. And now all of a sudden he's staring at 3 straight knockout losses. And I don't think it's his chin. I think it is just some mechanical issues that he has with some of his exchanges and combinations as far as defense. And it's his willingness to engage in the pocket against very dangerous opponents who can knock you out. That's really what it is. I mean, if Cody Garbrandt, and I don't know how the fight goes if he doesn't get into that wild brawl, but all respect to Pedro Munoz, all respect in the world to him. I think he's a very good fighter and a very underrated fighter. But skill for skill, Cody Garbrandt is a better fighter than Pedro Munoz. He is. He's got faster hands. He's got better boxing. He's got better knockout power. The only way, and Munoz is very good on the ground too, and doesn't show that much because he likes to stand and bang. But the only way that Cody Garbrandt probably loses that fight is the way that Cody Garbrandt lost that fight. I thought he was winning the fight up until that point, until it got completely insane. And I think if it goes 3 rounds, I think if you have 15 minutes, I think that Cody Garbrandt wins the fight. But didn't happen that way, and it looked like he just wanted to get out of there. It was almost like, he just kind of like threw caution to the wind and said, all right, someone's getting knocked out, either me or him. And that's just how it happened. And he ended up being the guy to get knocked out. It could have also gone the other way. And we could be talking about a different story right now. We could be talking about Garbrandt winning by knockout and a crazy knockout. But he didn't fight that way so much coming up. He was a little bit more tactical. I mean, against Dominic Cruz, granted, Dominic Cruz is not a guy that has big knockout power in his hands, so it's different. But God, yeah, if you're a Cody Garbrandt fan, you'd have to be just wondering, like, what is going on? Like, why?
Yeah, there are a couple of different things I want to mention, because that Garbrandt or the Cruz fight, we talk about that a lot, and I talked about that a lot in the lead up, and the way that we have now seen Cody the last 3 fights, it's almost making me think differently about the Cruz fight in one respect, and it's that I wonder if he was able to be so successful against Cruz because he didn't have that fear against a guy like Dominic, who doesn't have that power of what happens when I do get caught with these shots in this brawl. I don't know that Dominic Cruz can spark him out in a way that Munoz or TJ Dillashaw can, and I think that probably contributed to his ability to really succeed against Dominic in a way that he did that was so iconic in the moment. I will say before I will continue about Cody, but I want to jump over briefly and talk about Pedro Munoz for a second, because the damn dude just won an incredible fight, the fight of his life, and he has now won 7 of 8, and he is another one of these guys like a Vicente Luque who has just been on a sneaky great tear, finishing people left and right, and now he gets his opportunity to fight a big dog like Cody Garbrandt because Cody Garbrandt's team targets him. Basically, he wouldn't get this shot if it was just up to the UFC. Cody's team wanted Pedro. He wins that fight. Now 7 of 8. He's basically in this top tier of this bantamweight division now. Basically, I would say kind of alongside of like an Aljamain Sterling, right? Where you're in that top tier, but you're not quite the Marlon Moraes and TJ Dillashaw level. I would throw. I actually kind of like that Aljamain Sterling fight for him next. That seems like that to me figures out who's the next one of those guys before or after, I should say, Marlon Moraes.
Peter Yan.
Peter Yan?
Peter Yan versus Pedro Munoz.
Nah, man, you're doing a disservice to Pedro Munoz. I'm a big fan of Peter Yan, but that's too soon for Yan at this point. Pedro Munoz deserves a bigger fight than going all the way back down to a guy who is kind of on the periphery of the top 10. He just sparked out Cody Garbrandt in a couple minutes.
I understand that, but Yan just beat the guy that Munoz lost to. So
yeah, he's losing once in over the course of 7 or 8 fights in a split decision. I don't know that I'm going to fault Pedro Munoz for that, but I will say just to close out this conversation, I do think this is very much salvageable for Cody Garbrandt. I don't think this is a referendum on his career, or this is sort of the crossroads where he's now going to go down a path that he never wanted to go down. But it kind of needs to be figured out very quickly, right? Like, this is not something that is sustainable, where if you continue, especially in this young of an age, to suffer these bad knockout losses, at some point, that's just who you are. So he's got to fix this now. And it is very much, it seems to be a defensive issue where he just gets sucked into these brawls and he cannot help himself. And he needs to figure out how to not let himself get sucked into it. Because if you watched the UFC release that little clip this morning of the thrill and the agony, kind of the behind the scenes that they have, his corner, watching his corner watch that fight was so telling, because even Danny Castillo and Chris Holdsworth, their faces were very much of, why is this guy doing this again? We know he knows he's not supposed to be doing this. And I think that's sort of what all of us were thinking in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like, it's almost like Cody Garbrandt and Aaron Pico are going through a very similar thing, where they are wildly talented, and they're almost so talented that they're almost overconfident going to a fight, and they'll just swing until either the other guy falls or they fall.
Be more boring. Just be more boring.
Be more boring. Yeah, be more boring. It's okay. Win some fights. Get some, especially coming off a loss, like 2 losses like Garbrandt. Get that Munoz win under your belts, and then move on from there. And I mean, one thing, Uriah Faber was not in Cody Garbrandt's corner for this one, which I don't know how much that hurts or helps. But as far as a consistent presence in his life, Faber's been there for a while, and Uriah was not in Vegas. He's congratulations. He's having a child very soon. Him and his girlfriend. So wasn't in his corner. But I don't know what the answer is, because everything is there. It's like he has all the tools in the world.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's hit some Twitter questions as quickly as we can, and then we will get the promo and get out of here. Let's see. I'm looking right now. All right, I'm gonna take this one unless you got one teed up.
Go for it.
All right, this one's coming from Kuka MMA, who asks, which fighter from UFC 235 gets a title shot first? Johnny Walker, Pedro Munoz, or Zabit Magomedsharipov? Weekly listener from Brazil here. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for listening from Brazil. We very much appreciate it. I want to use this as an opportunity to hit these 2 guys that we haven't talked about yet. Johnny Walker or Zabit Magomedsharipov? I'm going to throw it to you. Which one do you want to talk about first?
You know the answer.
I know the answer. Go for it.
Johnny M.F. Walker.
How crazy was that? How crazy was it?
I mean, come on. This guy is out of his... He's crazy. I mean, this is ridiculous now. He has no business doing this. He has no business doing this, right? He came out, and with the first strike that he threw of the night was a flying knee knockout of Misha Serkinov, he's a tank. The man's a tank. I mean, wow. It's just so wild. I mean, and then he does the celebration, and he rotates his shoulder. I mean, the guy is just, you have to keep your eyes on him at all times, and I love it. I mean, this is a guy, Shaun, that has 3 fights in the UFC. 3 fights in the UFC. He has 3 first-round knockouts. Violent first-round knockouts. The only time that he's been injured is in the post-fight celebration. I mean, this guy is, I can't say enough. Hose me down. I love Johnny Walker.
And our good friend Aaron Bronstetter tweeted out a stat on Saturday night after that win that stunned me. Like I it's one of the most impressive stats I've ever seen, and that's over the course of his first 3 UFC fights, all knockout wins, like you said. Johnny Walker has thrown 11 strikes. He has gotten hit with like 8 strikes.
What?
Like what? I'm trying to not jump too much into hyperbole because I was a guy who before this fight, when this fight was first booked, I said I didn't like it. I thought it was too much too soon for Johnny Walker, and I thought Misha was going to beat him. And I look like an idiot, but hey, that's fine. I look like an idiot often. I'll take it. But I'm trying not to jump into hyperbole, but is that the best first 3 UFC fights for anybody ever? Like, is that the most efficient first 3 UFC fights of anybody ever? 3 knockouts, 11 strikes thrown.
I don't know who else has done that. Unless I'm forgetting someone. I mean, it feels like this is the hottest start in the UFC. I know people are going to say that I'm completely insane, and I am completely insane, but I think this is the hottest start in the UFC since Conor McGregor. I do.
But even Conor, like, he had the Max Holloway decision.
Right. That's
like,
right.
Early in his UFC career, like Johnny Walker's out here just doing whatever he wants.
Yeah. And this is all in the last few months. This is all recent. And he hasn't even been touched. Well, I mean, is he going to fight Alexander Gustafsson in Stockholm? Is that next, do you think, in June?
That's what he wants. That's what he wants. Is that too much too soon? I have no idea at this point.
I ask, but I don't know what this guy's capable of. He's a freak.
Well, hey, to answer the question that we were asked before we went on this little rant, of those 3 fighters, I think Zabit will be the first to fight for a title, just purely by the way that the divisions shake out. But if Johnny Walker goes in there and beats Alexander Gustafsson in Stockholm, especially in some kind of crazy fashion, all bets are off.
I think Johnny Walker is fighting for the title first, honestly.
I think the Gustafsson fight is too much too soon for him, but maybe I'm going to be an idiot again.
You thought that about Misha Serkinov, and you saw what happened.
Sure, yeah, you're not wrong.
It may be. I mean, I asked Dana White about this, and he said he didn't want to give Johnny Walker. He didn't want to throw him into the deep end yet. But
you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, he's not giving them much of a choice, man.
Ugh.
You can't do better. You can't do better.
And before we move on, I will say that one of the things I like the most about what he is doing is after all three of these fights, invariably after all of them, he comes back and he doesn't even seem remotely impressed with himself. He doesn't seem remotely happy with himself. And in fact, after the last 2, he has said multiple times, I'm actually disappointed because I want to get in there and be tested. I want to go 3 rounds. I want to know if I'm ready for that.
He wants to go 3 hounds, he said.
That's an incredible way to look at this, man. He is an impressive man right now. I
don't know what to say about that guy, man.
Whew. Well, hey, what's next? Hit me.
I'm all hot and bothered over here. There was one we don't know for sure about Aldo Volkanovski, but there's that apparently that seems like it's going to happen in Brazil, not for an interim title. There's a few questions about that fight, and also like what that means for the featherweight division. What will Ortega do next? So I guess just a general question, Shaun. If that does indeed come to pass, which it seems like it will, Volkanovski versus Aldo, not for the featherweight title or interim title, how do you see the rest of that division playing out now that Max Holloway is going up to 155 and fighting for the interim lightweight title against Dustin Poirier next month?
Yeah, so we mentioned it earlier in the show. I would put money that Frankie Edgar ends up fighting for some form of an interim title, just because they're going to need to do something to keep that division moving.
But against who? Against Ortega?
I don't know that it's going to be Ortega, because I don't think the UFC wants to rush into a Holloway Ortega 2 situation. Yeah. But I think that it's just going to end up happening. It'll probably just be against, like we've seen at this point, whoever is available for that date. Whoever is a top 8, top 10 person who can just kind of make that date on the schedule work.
So
I wouldn't be surprised at that point.
To me, and it again, it seems like it is going to happen, although we have not confirmed it with Volkanovski's side, and I don't think he's confirmed it either. If they do Aldo versus Volkanovski in Brazil, I actually think it doesn't make much sense. I don't think it makes much sense, because
I agree with you. At this point where we are with featherweight, that matchup now kind of makes things more confusing, because Volkanovski realistically should be fighting Frankie for the interim if we're doing an interim.
Right, and so basically, what is that left with? It's left with Ortega, who we just saw lose to Holloway, which again, you probably don't want that fight right away again. If Holloway does come back, and he may not even come back to the division, who knows? But you don't want to see Ortega in an interim title slot, most likely. You have Frankie Edgar, who is out there, but Volkanovski would have made sense for him as an opponent, and he lost to Ortega by knockout, so they're not doing that again. And then the next person down is probably like someone like Zabit, who Edgar's not going to fight because they're teammates. So it kind of leaves them in a weird position for featherweight, and it leaves Frankie Edgar with very little options to me, and that doesn't make sense. I don't know why they're going in that direction. Also, if Jose Aldo really only has 1 or 2 fights left after this, why is he fighting Volkanovski? I mean,
I like that. I mean, I liked the fight before the Max kind of left the division. It made sense before.
Well, okay. I mean, before he left the division, maybe, but if they're gonna inevitably do an interim title. We know this.
Yeah.
And that fight, I mean, are we gonna end up with Aldo again as like the featherweight champion or the interim champion at some point? I don't know, man. It's I don't know. Things are looking kind of weird at featherweight right now.
Yeah, they are. Let's see. Try to find another Twitter question. Here's one for you, Marc.
Yeah.
Just coming from Chewy Sanchez, who says, "Do you know if fighters take rule sets into consideration during their camps, or do they wait until the ref explains to them the day of the fight? John's fights were scheduled in Nevada, so I think he knew the rule. Maybe easier said than done."
No one knows the rules.
Yeah, that's the answer, right?
No one knows the rules. Most people don't know the rules. That's it. John Jones had no idea there were different rules in different states. He didn't know. He didn't know what the rule was after the fight. He thought it was something with like one palm down, or like he didn't know. He didn't know the rule. He did not know the rule. And again, I can't blame him because no one knows the rules. No one knows. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit in my promo in a few minutes. But yeah, that's a very, very quick answer. No one trains for the rules because no one knows the rules. They just train for a fight.
Yeah. Once I'm looking through these questions. One of these questions is from a gentleman who says, "Name 3 fighters who will win by knockout in 2018."
What the hell?
That's it. That's great. Well, hey, I got a good one here from Tragic Bronson, our old friend on Twitter. This is actually something we haven't talked about so far today, so I'm glad he asked. Please talk about this weekend's fight or fights.
Oh yeah.
He specifically mentions Curtis Millender versus Eliza Capoeiro, which is a crazy fight. But yeah, man, there are fights this weekend. What catches your eye on that card?
Well, definitely that one. I mean, if you're a fight fan, Millender versus Capoeira is just going to be a banger. I mean, so is the main event. I mean,
yeah,
Dos Santos versus Derek Lewis. I mean, that has violence written all over it. Certainly, although I've been wrong before in Derek Lewis fights. I mean, speaking of violence, Tim Means versus Nico Price.
That's the one I was gonna highlight.
That's nasty.
That's an all action fight. Like that's just gonna be fight
for days in that fight.
Also, right below that, I love this. The return of Ben Rothwell, man.
Right.
We were at such a cool moment a couple years ago with Ben Rothwell where he was doing this evil persona and he was cutting promos and making John Anik feel awkward. That was such a cool time. I really hope he's missed some time with, I think he had a USADA suspension, right?
2 years.
Yeah. He's missed some time, but I hope he can come back and re-inject evil Ben Rothwell. I hope he still is at that point.
Yeah, and he's fighting Blagoy Ivanov, who, by the way, is no slouch. Former PFL, or I guess WSOF and PFL heavyweight champion. So yeah, I mean it's a very interesting fight.
I mean, look at I've forgotten how good of a run, because it's easy to forget things in this sport, but I had forgotten how good of a run Ben Rothwell was on before he lost in his last outing. You look at the 4 guys he had beaten before he lost to Junior Dos Santos. Brandon Vera finishes him when he started just turning into like Clay Guida for a half a second in the 3rd round with that crazy movement. And then he goes on to knock out Alistair Overeem in the 1st round, chokes out Matt Mitrione with a go-go choke, and then chokes out Josh freaking Barnett with a go-go choke. That's an impressive run. Well done, Beth Rothwell.
Very impressive. Only problem is that he only fought like really once a year, so he couldn't really build any big momentum. I mean, he was nearing a title shot. If he would have beaten Dos Santos,
he definitely would have, yeah,
on that card in Croatia, which was the last time we saw him, he would have been on that list.
Yeah. All right, we have gone really long. Do you see anything else you want to get to before the promo?
No, let's just get into it. Let's get into the promo stuff.
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in first. And for mine, I mean, I want to highlight something that just came out it's something we saw on Saturday, but it's something that we specifically saw this morning. And I had mentioned the Thrill and the Agony video that the UFC put out this morning. But one thing in particular caught my eye above all else. And there's actually a lot of good stuff in that clip. I think Kamaru Usman and Tyron Woodley's mom share a very special moment too in there. So if you haven't seen it yet, go see that clip. But man, I want to give a shout out to Robbie Lawler. We have talked a lot about Robbie Lawler on this show, but holy crap, man. I don't know that I have ever seen an individual handle a situation that is an obviously tough and frustrating situation with the level of class that man handled it with on Saturday. Because if you watch that clip, it is basically just the immediate aftermath, and you can hear Herb Dean in his conversation after that stoppage. Herb Dean stops the fight. Robbie Lawler jumps up instantly, and he is still in fight mode. And for about 2 seconds, he is speaking with just absolute murderous intent, just very angry, very upset, kind of getting in Herb Dean's ear. And then literally 2 seconds later, as like a switch being flipped, Robbie Lawler does a complete 180. Becomes very respectful, actually becomes complimentary of her, being basically saying, you're a great referee. It's okay. You made a mistake. It's okay. You do a great job. Literally 3 seconds after all of this happened. I don't understand what it's like to be able to switch into fight mode. We've obviously been around fighters for a long time at this point. They have to have a mental switch that flips over the course of a fight week, where you just get in this zone where we're ready for war. We're ready to go into like this Coliseum type of environment, and anything can happen. And, maybe I can die in there. I don't understand what that's like, so I cannot relate to it in that regard. But just seeing Robbie Lawler escape that mode so quickly and become just a overly reasonable, overly nice human being, literally 2 seconds after something so immensely frustrating has happened to him. All the credit in the world to Robbie Lawler, man, because that man could have complained and he could have made a big scene and he could have gone on and on in the post-fight presser about all the mistakes that happened and why that he wants a rematch and why this and that and the other. And he did none of that. He was amazingly respectful of Herb Dean and Ben Askren the entire time. I cannot get enough of how Robbie Lawler handled that situation. This man has been in our lives for so long. He is one of the most terrifying men. He is one of the most violent men in the sport. And he's also one of the classiest. And all my credit goes out to Robbie Lawler for how he handled this weekend, man. That was unbelievably tough spot. And I don't know that any human being could have handled it better than he did.
Yeah, what a guy. I mean, top gent, that Robbie Lawler. Indeed. So I kind of want to, your promo kind of segues into mine, because I want to talk about all of the, I guess, quote unquote controversy from UFC 235. It's almost rare nowadays where we come out of a card and we're not talking about some kind of issue with a referee or a judge. It happens a lot, and UFC 235 was no stranger to that. If you look at the main event, Jones versus Smith, there was that illegal knee from John Jones. Herb Dean took away 2 points. Could have been a disqualification. So we're talking about what the referee did in that situation, what in that spot. Co-main event, Kamaru Usman versus Tyron Woodley, where Marc Goddard, the referee, repeatedly told Usman to work against the cage, repeatedly kind of separated the two when they were in a clinch and when they were on the grounds, with Usman in top position and dominant position. At one point, he even told Usman, this is a fight, compelling him to I guess, try to exact more damage. And that led to a very interesting and kind of surprising Twitter beef with John Anik, which John Anik is not a guy who gets into many beefs, period, where he called Marc Goddard arrogant. And then, of course, the headline of the controversy this week was the Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler stoppage, where Herb Dean thought that Robbie Lawler was unconscious in the bulldog choke from Askren. Turns out that he wasn't unconscious. Lawler was very much awake and alert as soon as that choke broke off, when Herb Dean stopped it for a submission. So another week and another card where we're talking about all this referee and judge stuff, and it kind of begs the question, like what is going on and how does this affect the sport? Does the lack of trust in officials, for better or worse, and I'm not even saying that those referees made bad calls necessarily in these situations, but you have to wonder, for a fan, does that deteriorate your trust in what the sport is? And are you constantly going to fights worried about what is going to happen as far as the referees and the judges? We already know how fans feel about judges. I mean, a lot of fans feel like it's a crapshoot when it goes to the card. Dana White says it himself. Don't leave it in the hands of the judges, which you should be able to, right? Now, I don't know what the answer is to this problem, but it's unfortunate that a lot of the stories coming out of big fight cards involve regulation. And I think that Marc Goddard and Herb Dean are very good referees. I do think that John McCarthy retiring and becoming a broadcaster with Bellator has hurt regulation a little bit, because not only when John McCarthy was on the card, and look, he made his fair share of mistakes too. There's no doubt it's going to happen. But not only was John McCarthy the guy who was going to be in the main or the co-main event for every high-profile card, but he was also like the leader in the locker room. He was also kind of like the guy that took referees aside and kind of, told them what was going on, and he was just a good guy to have around. He was kind of the glue guy back there. So I'm not saying that the loss of him has kind of affected things in a negative way, but certainly having him in there is good. But I will say one more thing, and again, I don't really have a solution to this. But the Lawler Askren stoppage, I know a lot of people are killing Herb Dean for this, and it did seem like it was the wrong decision, because again, Lawler was not just conscious, but he was alert. I mean, as soon as that fight stopped, he jumped up, and we saw it, and you spoke about it in your promo. But I want to tell people, if you haven't checked out the Gracie breakdown with Henner and Heaton about the Lawler Askren finish, I urge you to do so, because it was probably the most interesting perspective on it that I've seen so far. And Luke Thomas shared it the other day too. Basically, what they're saying is it was an early stoppage, but not a bad stoppage. And I don't want to go into it too much, because they did it much better than I can, because they're pros at this kind of stuff. But basically, what they were saying, Shaun, is Robbie Lawler was not unconscious at that point, although it did look very bad, and he was in a bad spot, and you can't completely blame Herb Dean. But given who Askren is and the effectiveness of that choke, they felt like Herb Dean was exercising almost a necessary caution, because it's a very, very dangerous choke, and it's a choke that can end the fight very quickly. Oh, and it's almost more effective than a rear naked choke, with the strength of which that choke can. I mean, Askren had his whole back into it. Anyway, go let them explain it better than I can. But just wanted to say, check that out, and also what can this crazy world of MMA do better as far as regulation? I don't know. We're trying to figure it out. How can referees and judges kind of gain the trust back of fans and fighters? It's an interesting ongoing storyline in the sport.
Well said, sir. Well said. Well, hey, this has been a long episode of the ASI Live Chat Podcast. It has been a fun one. You guys brought it with the questions today, and we always really appreciate it. This show will be up immediately on YouTube replay, also iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, etc. You know how it goes by now. We'll be back next week with another episode. There will be plenty to discuss. Wichita will be in the books, and I know there's another UFC event coming. I can't even think of it off the top of my head, because that's London. How it goes. What is it?
UFC London.
There we go, London. Ben Askren will be there. Darren Till will be there. George Masvidal will be there. Whole bunch of things to talk about. In the meantime,
are you go and throw up right now after this? Are you gonna go right to the bathroom and just?
Yeah, and hopefully by that point I will have been able to eat a meal. I have not eaten a full meal since Friday night, and it's starting to kill me. I'm barely alive at this point.
I need to get on that diet. I could use not eating a full meal diet for a few days probably.
I don't know. You were looking pretty swole in Vegas last week.
I mean, that's one way of putting it.
Well, hey, that wraps it up here for us. Thank you so much for watching.
With 2 C's, I think someone said.
What's that?
Thick with 2 C's.
Oh, man. This has been the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti. That man is Marc Raimondi. We'll see you next week for another fun episode. In the meantime, enjoy the fights. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. We love you guys. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace.
Peace.